Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome everyone once again to a forum, a program organized by the Islamic Renaissance Front, IRF. I'm sure it's not most of us here, we are quite familiar with IRF. We are a think tank promoting youth empowerment and also Islamic reform, particularly in contesting important issues, critical issues for the benefit of the Malaysian society, particularly among the Muslims ourselves. And today I would like to start to greet everyone, and of course distinguished speakers, honorable guests that we have. We have a very good list of panel here, of course, senior politicians and scholars from locally in Malaysia, and also I would like to welcome again Professor Nader Hashemi to his third visit to Malaysia. Yeah. So, in fact, today this session is actually the second session. Yesterday we had a more closed discussion and quite in detail discussion as well on the topic relating to a book by Professor Khalid Abu Fadil, Reasoning with God, in which we discussed in detail the challenge and the problems that we are facing related to the problem of I cannot recall the exact topic, but mainly on the simplification of understanding of religion, the problem of literalism, and the advancing of extremist views and Salafism and Wahhabism as well. But today, we are going to have a different discussion. In fact, we are lucky in a way. In one session, we are going to have two main activities. Not really activities, but two topics of discussion. I would like to start with the first session on a book launch. It's a book launch, a book translation on a very important book written by a very well-known scholar. I'm sure you all have known. We have invited as well Professor Tariq Ramadan. He's based in the University of Oxford. One of his important book, which is called What I Believe. So why is it a very important, prominent scholar writing something which is usually understood as something very basic? What I believe. Or in the translated version is apa yang aku yakini, because that is so basic and so fundamental in Malaysia. Everyone has to believe. In Malaysia, it is part of the rukun negara. To be a citizen, you must believe. Number one, kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, right? So it's very simple thing to say. Why is it we need to have a very important scholar to touch on this topic? But that is the thing. When we consider about Malaysia, it is always about what we believe. In a way, it is something as if it is something that is being enforced. We are forced to believe. Since we are born, we are already told to believe. Do we actually have a chance to say that we, or not we, I believe in something? Because the general understanding of belief is already collective. So maybe there is something very important for us to consider in this book, which is called What I Believe, or the translation of it is Apa yang aku yakini. So to continue this discussion, I would like to invite Dr. Dato Saifuddin Abdullah. He will be giving an opening speech on this topic and later would launch the translated version of the book, What I Believe, or Apa yang aku yakini. Please, Dato Saifuddin.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Brother Chairperson, I would like to personally welcome Professor Nader Hashemi for the third safe time, inshallah, to Malaysia. Oops, oops. My beloved brothers and sisters, you know, Farouk has a certain way of doing things, and before you realize it, you say, yes, I will do it for you. And here I am, in the most humble manner, trying to launch the translation of a book. I mean, you can launch a book, a translation of a book, but to launch something that is written by Tariq Ramadan is another thing altogether. I'm deeply honored to be given this opportunity. This book was written, or published rather, in 2009, And I must congratulate IRF for translating it into, this was published in 2010. I must congratulate IRF for translating it into Malay. I'm holding the English version of the book. I have scanned through the Malay version of it. Knowing Farouk and the gang, I can guarantee you that they have done justice to the translation, and I think they have done a good work. Congratulations. We all know Tariq Ramadan as a scholar based in London. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he is well, in high spirits, in good spirits, because in today's world, you don't have to have your name to be tweeted by Donald Trump. Sorry, Ravi. But sometimes you can get into all kinds of tribulations and challenges for simply standing up and speaking up and being firm and being steadfast on your thoughts. And our thoughts are today, of course, with our dear brother, Tariq Ramadan. We all know him as a scholar. He does not mince his words. He's very articulate. He writes in beautiful English. And I'm sure many of you have not only read him, but also have perhaps listened to him. Even though I'm launching the translation of what I believe, but before I forget, I would also like to impress upon you that you will be able to deeper understand the reason why he wrote this book if you were to write the other books. In particular, the one that was published a year before this one, Radical Islam. And Radical Islam, Radical Reform, thank you, Farouk. Radical Reform was written as a continuation of 3 other books about his dialogue with the West. I won't go down to listing down the name or the title of the books. But I think that would put our understanding to why he has to come up with this little but beautifully written book in 2010. In what I believe, I'm reading here from the cover, being very lazy politician, you don't have someone to write for you, so you do it yourself. Ramadan attempts to set the record straight, laying out the basic ideas he stands for in clear and accessible prose. He describes the book as a work of clarification, directed at ordinary citizens, politicians, journalists, and others who are curious or skeptical about his position. Aware that he is dealing with emotional issues, Ramadan tries to get past the barriers of prejudice and misunderstanding to speak directly from the heart to his Muslim and non-Muslim readers alike. In particular, he calls on Western Muslims to escape the mental, social, cultural, and religious ghettos they have created for themselves and become full partners in the democratic societies in which they live. At the same time, he calls for the rest of us to recognize our Muslim neighbors as citizens with rights and responsibilities the same as ours. You will see this kind of dialogue in almost every chapter throughout the book. At the same time, he is talking to Muslims. At the same time, he is talking to non-Muslims, especially the West. One of the accusations thrown against him is that he do double speak, that he speak to the West in a different language register, in a different way, and then he speaks to the Muslim in a different way. I think Ramadan has, in a very eloquent manner, presented his views in defending his position that he is not in any way, at any time, doing a double speak. He is simply doing what a good da'i is supposed to do. Talking to different kind of people with a different kind of language register that is suitable to the kind of audience that he is speaking to. Any students of da'wah will understand. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah wal mau'izatil hasanah wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan. You speak, you present yourself with wisdom, with good teachings, and you teach, and you debate, and you dialogue. Wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan, in the best of ways, in the best of manners. And that's exactly what Ramadan has been doing in all of his books, Radical Islam and the others, Radical Reform and the others. Yeah? It is about presenting Islam in its most fresh manner, in its most contemporary interpretation. And this is why sometimes people misunderstood him. He is presenting Islam, in his word, using the reformist approach. And what does he mean by using a reformist approach? He outlined this in his book, and he has been doing this all the while. Yeah. In Radical Reform, he talks about bridging the gap between the ulama and the intellectuals. Yeah. Bridging the gap between the scholars of the text and the scholars of waqi', the scholars of context. Bringing the fuqaha and the scientists and the human sciences, human scientists, exact science and human sciences, the experts together in making fatwa, in giving the most up-to-date opinion on a given situation. And he has been consistent in using what he called the 3 distinct steps. The first step is, of course, to use the sources, the Quran, the Hadith, and so on and so forth. The second step, to read, to analyze the different readings offered by scholars, or different past interpretations by different scholars on the condition or the subject in front of us. And finally, thirdly, suggest an understanding and implementation that take into account the context in which we are here. This is what I call, I quote, that is what I call the reformist approach, unquote. But of course, there are people who are not happy with this reformist approach. There are people who are so text-oriented to the extent that you fall into the trap of ta'liq, of following blindly and not being able to think, not being able to do independent reading and independent interpretation. And for some people, the word independent interpretation is also taboo. Yeah, because you cannot be independent. Of course, I mean, we leave that for another debate. Another important, I mean, that is one of the, that is Tariq Ramadan that we know. Another important clarification and also another important content of the book is his call for his Muslim brothers and sisters to know the other. You may be living in the West. You may started to live in France or in Germany as an immigrant, but you already settled down. You may be living in North America. Yeah? You started as an immigrant, but you have settled down. All he is saying is, please settle down in the real sense of the word, interact and participate as a member of the society. And by doing so, you will not become less Muslim. He used the term multiple identity. Yeah? You can be a French, you can be a Muslim. Yeah? You are an Arab living in France, you are a French by citizen, but you're also a Muslim. It's not a contradiction. And he also challenged his Muslim brothers and sisters that whatever the challenges are, one should not withdraw or live in isolation. You have to be a part of the society. And that is what Islam is all about. We become part of the society. And his clarion call in this context is we must face it, face the real challenge with self-confidence among ourselves, in our own individual self, and build trust with the other people, especially the West, the non-Muslim, and so on. And he called on both Muslim and non-Muslim, or Muslim and the West, that they should understand each other. And if I may read to you briefly, two very important paragraphs on page 22 of the book. One paragraph which I think is very important. To Muslims, I repeat that Islam is a great and noble religion, but that all Muslims and Muslim majority societies did not in the past and do not now live up to this nobleness. Critical reflection is required about faithfulness to our principles, our outlooks on others, on cultures, freedom, the situation of women, and so on. Our contradictions and ambiguities are countless. To Westerners, I similarly repeat that the undeniable achievements of freedom and democracy should not make us forget murderous civilizing missions, colonization, the destructive economic order, racism, discrimination, and so on, with the worst dictatorships and other relations with the worst dictatorships and other feelings. Our contradictions and ambiguities are countless. I am equally demanding and rigorous with both universes. The other thing that you can feel from this writing of Ramadan is that, and this I'm reflecting on his radical reform. More often than not, we do Islah, we do reform, we do what he called as adaptation reform. We adapt. Things have moved so far in front, and then as Muslim, we gather around the table and start saying, what is Islamic? How do we regain our position, or how do we prevent ourselves from getting lost in these challenging new realities? He advocated the idea of transformation reform or transformation approach, that Islam is not something that you use simply to get along with. Islam should not be seen as lagging behind and having to play catch up, but you really have to actually determine, define, just like any other civilization, what the future is all about. And in the context of Malaysia, this is very relevant. It is relevant because if he is trying to mediate between Islam and the West, in Malaysia we also have the same problem. We have to take this upon ourselves that we also have to mediate between Muslim and non-Muslim, between the majority and the minority, and so on and so forth. The question about unity, national integration, the question about ending discrimination, and so on and so forth comes into the picture. And more importantly, when it comes to the idea about transformation, is our ability as Muslim to translate Islam into real, concrete policies, laws, if you like, programs and activities for the Ummah. And by the Ummah, I mean not only Muslim Ummah, Ummah in the context of citizenry, Ummah as in the context of Malaysia. He reminded us that we should not be politically naive to not understand what is happening around us, including what the media wants to report. And in the context of our program being hosted by IRF, what thought policing is all about. We should be very clear that we know what we are doing, and we should not be so worried about people attending and supervising. I always say, Professor Nader, that they are simply looking after our security and safety to make sure we are all okay. Yeah, hopefully so. His other major contribution in the book is about interreligious dialogue. He stresses the importance of understanding each other better, knowing the other religion. But I like the way he presented his case, that it is not simply about talking to the other, and it is not sufficient to arrive at an agreement that we all have what is now a cliche, common values or shared values. He is encouraging us to go beyond common values, to look into actual, concrete activities. And for that, he proposed that the best kind of interreligious understanding will only happen if you cooperate together in carrying out actual work, especially at the grassroots level. And here I'm reminded of, for instance, among others, the good work of FGIS, the Friendship Group for Interfaith Services. People from all religions coming together. They organize all kinds of work. They pray together. They organize charity work. They even have started in their own way a children orchestra, which I thought is very important. I'm always jealous with people who know how to play music, because that is one thing that I can never do. Don't ask me to sing, never ask me to play any musical instrument. I die. I would rather die. Now, let me then read to you his conclusion, and I will take this the last paragraph of his conclusion. Yeah. All these things that he was writing about, and all these good things that we are working on, it will take time. It will take patience. Genuine, impressive advances have already been achieved. Beyond the crisis in the media and politics, new dynamics emerge. Initiatives and interesting projects bring together women and men who refuse polarization, simplification, manipulation, and exclusion. Politicians and social workers, locally or nationally, responsible and conscientious journalists, ordinary and or anonymous citizens, those women and men are far more numerous than is generally believed. And they share a certain sense of humanity, dignity, and ethics, whether they are believers or not, Muslims or not. It is with those women and men that the future must be built, without naivety, but with trust and determination. I believe the Malay version of the book will be a tremendous read, as much as the English version is a tremendous read. And I believe this is one of our way of sharing the kalimah, sharing the knowledge of Allah Almighty between all of us, and may Allah grant us His blessings. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.